Darko Milicic. One name, one pick, one decision that will always haunt the Pistons franchise. The 2003 NBA draft is one of the greatest in league history. LeBron James went number 1, a no-brainer. But at number 2, the Detroit Pistons were on the clock. Carmelo Anthony was right there. So was Dwayne Wade. So was Chris Bosh. And they took Darko Milicic, a 7-footer from Serbia that barely anyone had seen play. The Pistons bought into the hype, the size, the frame, the idea of upside, but from the jump, something felt off. Larry Brown didn't trust him. The Pistons were in win-now mode, and Darko was raw, real raw. So he rode the bench, hard. He played just 159 total minutes during Detroit's championship season. Meanwhile, Carmelo became a scoring icon. D. Wade won Finals MVP before turning 25. Bosh anchored a dynasty with LeBron and D. Wade in Miami. But Darko, he bounced around 6 teams in 10 years, never averaging more than 8 points in a season, and was out of the league before 30. He wasn't just a bust, he became the bust. The one that gets name-dropped anytime a team reaches for potential over proven talent. He's not remembered for what he did, but for who Detroit didn't take. The worst part, the Pistons were already a title contender, and they still swung and missed harder than just about anyone ever has. Darko wasn't the start of a dynasty, he was the end of what could have been. Anthony Bennett. Still to this day, this was the worst and most shocking number 1 pick in NBA history. When the Cavs walked up to the podium in 2013 and announced his name first overall, you could literally hear the confusion. Analysts were speechless, fans were stunned. Even Bennett himself looked surprised. He wasn't projected to go first, not second, not even top 5 on most draft boards. But Cleveland gambled on the idea of Bennett, a 6'8 forward with a strong frame, supposed versatility, and flashes of scoring upside. What they got instead? A player who looked lost from day one. He shot 35% from the field as a rookie, not from 3, from the field. He looked out of shape, overwhelmed, and unprepared. And it never got better. Bennett never averaged more than 5 points in a season. He played for 4 different teams in 4 years, and by the age of 23, he was out of the league entirely. Meanwhile, that same draft produced Giannis Antetokounmpo, CJ McCollum, and Rudy Gobert, players who became stars, MVPs, and defensive anchors. But Bennett? He finished his NBA career with just 638 total points. Not in a season, in his career. No number 1 pick has ever done less. He wasn't just a bust, he was the cautionary tale and proof that betting on potential without production can completely blow up in your face. Greg Oden. He wasn't just supposed to be good, he was supposed to be dominant. A 7-footer with elite shot-blocking instincts, soft hands, and the frame of an NBA veteran. At Ohio State, Oden was a force, leading his team to the national title game despite playing with a broken wrist. He was the ultimate big man prospect, so when Portland landed the number 1 pick in 2007, they didn't hesitate. They picked Oden over Kevin Durant, and at the time, it made sense. But that decision unraveled faster than anyone imagined. Before he even played a game, Oden underwent microfracture surgery on his knee. He missed his entire rookie season, and that was just the beginning. Injuries followed him like a shadow, chronic, relentless, and devastating. When he did play, he showed real promise, averaging 11 points, 8 rebounds, and nearly 2 blocks in limited action. But limited was the key word. In total, Greg Oden played 105 games across 7 years. Kevin Durant, meanwhile, turned into a league MVP, 2-time Finals MVP, and one of the greatest scorers of all time. Oden wasn't lazy, he wasn't overhyped, he just had a body that wouldn't cooperate. His story isn't one of failure, it's one of heartbreak. He had all the tools, but none of the time. Greg Oden wasn't a bust because of effort, he was a bust because his knees gave out before his career could even begin. Kwame Brown. The first high school player ever taken number 1 overall, picked by none other than Michael Jordan himself. And from that moment on, the expectations were unreal. Kwame wasn't just stepping into the NBA, he was stepping into the spotlight under the most competitive player in history. Jordan didn't just draft him, he became his teammate and his toughest critic. At 18 years old, Kwame was thrown into a dysfunctional Wizards locker room. No college development, no time to grow, and no mercy from MJ. Physically, he had the tools, a 7-foot wingspan, a strong frame, good mobility. But mentally, he wasn't ready. His hands were shaky, his footwork was raw, his confidence shattered. Over time, Kwame became serviceable, a big body off the bench. He played 12 seasons in the league, which isn't nothing. But for a number 1 pick, he never averaged more than 11 points per game, never made an all-star team, never lived up to the hype. Meanwhile, the same 2001 draft produced Pau Gasol, Tony Parker, Joe Johnson, and Gilbert Arenas, all picked after Kwame. All went on to become stars. Kwame wasn't the worst player in NBA history, but he became the face of the word bust. Not because of what he was, but because of what he wasn't. He wasn't ready, he wasn't developed, and he was never given room to fail quietly. Kwame Brown wasn't just a pick that didn't pan out. He was a kid handed the keys to the kingdom before he could even drive. Hasheem Thabeet. The tallest player in the 2009 draft and easily the biggest reach. At 7'3", Thabeet was a shot-blocking monster out of UConn. Long arms, intimidating presence, and a defensive resume that had scouts drooling. The Memphis Grizzlies bought into the hype, taking him 2nd overall, right before NBA MVPs like James Harden and Steph Curry. Yeah, that actually happened. On paper, it made sense. Elite size, proven rim protector, but the moment Thabeet hit the NBA floor, it was clear. He wasn't ready. He was stiff, his footwork clunky, touch around the rim practically non-existent. And in a league moving towards speed, skill, and spacing, Thabeet was stuck in the past. He lasted just 13 games before getting sent to the G League, becoming the highest drafted player ever demoted. Over 5 seasons, he averaged just 2 points and 2 rebounds per game. He couldn't stay on the floor, couldn't stay on a roster. And by the time his rookie contract ended, so did any hope of salvaging his potential. Meanwhile, the players Memphis passed on were busy redefining basketball. Steph became the greatest shooter of all time. Harden became an MVP. Thabeet, he quietly faded out of the league, barely a blip on the radar by age 27. He wasn't a bad guy, he wasn't lazy, he was just a product of bad scouting and an outdated mindset. Hasheem Thabeet wasn't just a bust, he was a franchise misstep that cost Memphis years of momentum. Michael Olowokandi. The name alone brings Clippers fans pain. In 1998, the Clippers held the number 1 overall pick, and with future Hall of Famers on the board, they chose a 7-foot center from the University of the Pacific. Michael Olowokandi had the size, the look, the measurables, and almost none of the game to back it up. He wasn't a high school phenom or a blue-chip college star. He played at a mid-major, came to basketball late, but his frame and athleticism screamed potential, and the Clippers fell for it hard. They passed on Dirk Nowitzki, Paul Pierce, and Vince Carter, all future Hall of Famers. And what did they get in return? A project that never got finished. Olowokandi struggled from the jump. Bad hands, bad footwork, low basketball IQ. He never averaged more than 12 points and 9 rebounds in a season. He looked the part of a franchise big man, but played like a backup. In 5 forgettable seasons with the Clippers, he showed flashes, but they were just that, flashes. He became a journeyman, bouncing to Minnesota and Boston before quietly exiting the league in 2007. He finished his career averaging just 8 points and 6 rebounds, numbers that barely crack rotation player territory, let alone justify a number 1 overall pick. Olowokandi didn't just underperform, he became a symbol of the Clippers' dysfunction, a walking reminder that potential means nothing without development. The Candyman was supposed to sweeten the future. Instead, he left a bad taste in franchise history. Adam Morrison. College basketball's poster boy in 2006. The flowing hair, the vintage mustache, the raw emotion. He didn't just play, he performed. Morrison led the nation in scoring at Gonzaga, dropping 40-point games like it was light work and played every possession like it was life or death. He had fans, he had fire, and he had comparisons to Larry Bird. So when the Charlotte Bobcats picked him 3rd overall, it felt like they were buying into a scorer who could revive a young franchise. But that college magic, it never made it to the league. Morrison's game, based on footwork, mid-range mastery, and emotion, didn't translate to an NBA that was getting faster, more athletic, and more physical. He struggled to create separation. He couldn't guard anyone, and his confidence vanished almost immediately. His rookie year was underwhelming. Then came the real blow, a torn ACL before year 2. He missed the entire season and was never the same again. Charlotte gave up. He got traded to the Lakers, where he picked up 2 rings, sitting at the end of the bench. By age 26, he was out of the league for good. Morrison finished his career averaging just 7.5 points on 37% shooting, not even close to what was expected from a top 3 pick. He wasn't lazy, he wasn't immature, he just didn't have the tools to thrive in the NBA. Adam Morrison was a college legend, but in the league, he was a ghost. Jimmer Fredette. If you watched college hoops in 2011, you remember Jimmer. He wasn't just a scorer, he was a phenomenon. Pulling up from 30 feet, dropping 40-point bombs, crowds chanting his name like he was a rock star. At BYU, he was must-see TV, averaging nearly 29 points per game. And he wasn't doing it in transition, he was hitting step-backs, contested threes, and off-the-dribble daggers from deep. The Kings saw the hype, the shooting, the swagger, and they took him 10th overall. But the NBA, it doesn't hand out sympathy points for heat checks. Jimmer's size and lack of athleticism made him a tweener, too small to guard 2s, too slow to guard 1s, and without the ball in his hands constantly like in college, he couldn't find rhythm, couldn't get his shot off, and when the shot didn't fall, there was nothing else to lean on. He bounced around the league, Sacramento, Chicago, New Orleans, New York. Every team gave him a shot. None gave him a long leash. Within 5 seasons, he was out of the league. Meanwhile, that same draft class saw Kawhi Leonard, Klay Thompson, Jimmy Butler, and Isaiah Thomas taken after Jimmer. All of them became all-stars. Some became legends. Jimmer, on the other hand, he became a superstar in China, dominating the CBA and putting up monster numbers overseas, but could never make a run in the NBA. Jimmer Fredette was a college legend who couldn't find his footing in a league that demanded more than just a jumper. Marvin Bagley III. In 2018, the Sacramento Kings had a golden opportunity. They held the number 2 pick in a draft that featured future stars like Luka Doncic, Jaren Jackson Jr., Trae Young, Mikal Bridges, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And they chose Marvin Bagley III. On paper, it wasn't crazy. Bagley was a 6'11" athletic freak at Duke, averaging 21 and 11, running the floor like a wing with soft touch around the basket. He looked like the prototype for a modern big man, but the promise never translated to production. Early on, Bagley flashed. He had bounce, energy, and a few double-doubles, but injuries kept piling up. His development stalled. The jumper never evolved, and defensively, he was often lost. Late on rotations, slow to switch, and constantly targeted. By year 4, Sacramento gave up. They traded him to Detroit, hoping a fresh start would help. It didn't. By 2025, Bagley is still in the league, still just 26 years old, but firmly in the rotational big category. He's bounced between roles, struggled with consistency, and never regained the hype that made him a top 2 pick. And Luka? He's become a perennial MVP candidate and face of the NBA. The Kings didn't just miss, they missed historically. But it didn't stop there. The Kings also passed on Trae Young, a multiple-time All-Star and the engine of the Hawks offense, the 2025 MVP and SGA, who is now a top 5 player in the league, Jaren Jackson Jr., an All-Star and Defensive Player of the Year recipient, Jalen Brunson, the All-NBA point guard who just led the Knicks to the Eastern Conference Finals, and Mikal Bridges, one of the most complete two-way wings in basketball. Bagley's not out of the league. He's still young, still talented, still fighting, but in a draft loaded with stars, franchise cornerstones, award winners, and playoff killers, Sacramento walked away with the one guy who never made any All-NBA, All-Star, or All-Defense team. Marvin Bagley wasn't a disaster, but when you get the pick that wrong in that draft, the stain lasts forever. Johnny Flynn. Fast, flashy, fearless. At Syracuse, he was electric. A 6-foot guard with a lightning-quick first step, a confident handle, and a reputation for big moments. That 6 overtime classic against UConn, legendary. He looked like a future star. So when the Minnesota Timberwolves picked him 6th overall in 2009, it wasn't a total shock, until you remember who was still on the board. Steph Curry. Yeah. To make things worse, Minnesota had just taken Ricky Rubio at number 5, another point guard, then passed on Steph, the greatest shooter in NBA history, to take Johnny Flynn. And that's the legacy. Flynn had a solid rookie year, 13.5 points, 4.4 assists, and started all 81 games. But then came the turning point, a serious hip injury before his second season. His explosiveness, gone. His confidence shaken. The same guy who once diced up Big East defenses suddenly couldn't stay in front of NBA guards, or get by them. He bounced around the league, Houston to Portland, before falling out of the NBA entirely by age 24. He played just 163 career games, averaged 9 points, and was out of sight before most fans even knew he was gone. Meanwhile, Curry became a 2-time MVP, 3-point revolution leader, and top 10 player of all time. And Johnny, he became the cautionary tale. Johnny Flynn wasn't terrible, but when you're picked right before Steph Curry, that's all anyone will ever remember. Sam Bowie. The name forever etched in NBA history, for all the wrong reasons. In 1984, the Portland Trail Blazers held the 2nd overall pick in what would become one of the most legendary drafts of all time. Hakeem Olajuwon went first, the Bulls sat at number 3, and right between them sat Portland. They already had Clyde Drexler, they needed size, a big man, and so they passed on a kid named Michael Jordan, and took, you guessed it, Sam Bowie. Now, to be fair, Bowie wasn't some random reach. He was a 7-footer out of Kentucky with real skill. He could shoot, pass, defend, but he had a problem: his legs. 2 major stress fractures in college had already cost him 2 full seasons, and yet Portland gambled. It didn't pay off. Bowie's body betrayed him over and over again. Fractures, surgeries, setbacks. He missed 76 games in year 2. 62 in year 3. By the time Jordan was winning MVPs and redefining basketball, Bowie was rehabbing another injury. To his credit, he hung around, played 10 seasons, had some solid years in New Jersey, but the damage was done. He didn't flop because he lacked heart. He flopped because his frame couldn't carry the weight of history. Sam Bowie wasn't a bust because he was bad, he was a bust because he was picked 1 spot ahead of the greatest player of all time. The draft didn't ruin him, it just buried him in comparison. Dragan Bender. Another tall international prospect with next Porzingis buzz, and another swing that completely missed. In the 2016 NBA draft, the Phoenix Suns used the 4th overall pick on Bender, a 7-footer from Croatia who was just 18 years old. The scouting report? He could shoot, he could pass, he could switch. In theory, he was everything you'd want in a modern stretch big. But the reality wasn't even close. Bender came to the league not ready, physically, mentally, or skill-wise. He looked the part, but his game was incomplete. He shot under 40% from the field as a rookie, rarely impacted games, and got lost defensively far too often. He spent 3 seasons in Phoenix, never averaging more than 6.5 points per game, then bounced to Golden State, Milwaukee, and eventually overseas, never sticking long enough to make an impression. His biggest issue? He didn't have any defining NBA skill. Couldn't shoot well enough to be a stretch 4, couldn't rebound well enough to be a 5, couldn't defend well enough to be trusted. Meanwhile, the Suns passed on Jamal Murray, Domantas Sabonis, Pascal Siakam, all of whom became NBA champions or all-stars. Bender wasn't a locker room problem, he wasn't a headline-making disaster, he just faded. Dragan Bender is the kind of bust that doesn't crash and burn. He quietly disappears and leaves a team wondering why they fell in love with potential instead of production. Josh Jackson. Coming out of Kansas, he looked like the prototype. 6'8", athletic, explosive, a two-way wing with serious upside. He could guard multiple positions, finish at the rim, and had flashes of playmaking. The Phoenix Suns saw a future franchise cornerstone and took him 4th overall in 2017. But what they got instead was chaos. From day one, Jackson's decision-making was erratic. His jumper, broken. His shot selection, worse. And on the defensive end, where he was supposed to shine, he gambled constantly and lost focus just as often. Off the court, things didn't help. He missed team events, clashed with coaches, and was arrested for trying to sneak into a VIP section at a concert while already on thin ice with the organization. By his second season, the Suns were done. They dumped him to Memphis and even had to attach a draft pick just to get him off the roster. That's how fast the Josh Jackson experiment unraveled. He had a brief resurgence in Detroit, averaging double figures and flashing potential again, but it didn't last. Jackson is out of the league, still only 27, but with his NBA career on pause, if not over completely. Meanwhile, the 2017 draft gave us Jason Tatum, Donovan Mitchell, Bam Adebayo, Lauri Markkanen, and Derek White, all taken after Jackson. Josh Jackson had the tools, but the focus, maturity, and development never showed up. He wasn't just a miss, he was the Suns making back-to-back top 4 mistakes, and paying for it in lost years. James Wiseman. In 2020, the Golden State Warriors had a rare top pick in a loaded draft, and with the 2nd overall pick, they took James Wiseman, a 7-footer with elite measurables, smooth athleticism, and sky-high potential. He looked like the perfect modern big, runs the floor, soft touch, rim protection, and in theory, a long-term fit next to Steph, Klay, and Draymond as they chased one last dynasty run. But in practice, it was a mess. Wiseman had only played 3 games at Memphis before becoming draft eligible, and the lack of experience showed. He struggled to grasp Golden State's complex read and react system. Rotations were missed, screens weren't set, and on defense he often looked lost. Then came the injuries, including a torn meniscus that sidelined him for nearly a full year. By the time he returned, the Warriors had won another title without him. He was no longer a developmental project. He was a luxury they couldn't afford. By year 3, Golden State gave up. They shipped him to Detroit, hoping he'd grow in a low-pressure environment, but even there, the flashes were rare. Wiseman is hanging on to a rotation spot, still just 24, but far from what he was supposed to be. And the rest of the 2020 class, LaMelo Ball, Rookie of the Year and an All-Star, Tyrese Halliburton, a full-blown star that led the Pacers to the finals, and Tyrese Maxey, an All-Star in Philly. Wiseman wasn't a head case, he wasn't unskilled, but when the timeline is tight and development is slow, even talent can't buy you time. Golden State didn't just miss, they wasted a championship window. Markelle Fultz. He was supposed to be the final piece, the smooth-scoring 3-level bucket getter to complete the process in Philadelphia. The Sixers believed so much in Fultz they traded up to take him number 1 overall in 2017, ahead of Jason Tatum, Donovan Mitchell, and Bam Adebayo. And at Washington, he looked every bit the part. 6'4", explosive first step, a silky jumper, and the ability to score from anywhere. He looked like a guaranteed NBA star. Then, everything unraveled. Almost overnight, Fultz forgot how to shoot. His mechanics broke down. His free throws looked like they were shot underwater. The diagnosis? Thoracic outlet syndrome, a rare nerve issue in his shoulder that derailed his confidence and his career. He played just 33 games in Philly, and when he did, he looked like a shell of the top prospect he once was. By year 2, the Sixers moved on, sending him to Orlando for pennies on the dollar. But give Fultz credit, he fought back. In Orlando, he rebuilt his form, regained confidence, and became a capable playmaker and defender. Not a star, not the scorer he was projected to be, but a solid NBA guard. The problem? He wasn't drafted to be solid, he was drafted to be special. And while Jason Tatum became a franchise cornerstone, Fultz became a reclamation project. He wasn't a bust because of laziness, he was a bust because his body failed him at the worst possible moment. A heartbreaking what if, and a cautionary tale of how quickly it can all fall apart. Every year, the NBA draft promises a new era, a fresh start, a future star. But as we've just seen, not every pick turns into a legend. Sometimes the can't-miss prospect is actually a major miss. And sometimes the next big thing never becomes anything. Injuries, bad fits, misdevelopment, whatever the reason, busts are part of the game. And while it's easy to judge in hindsight, these stories are more than just stats. They're lessons in what makes or breaks an NBA career. If you made it this far, do us a favor, like this video and subscribe for more deep dives just like this one. And don't forget to drop a comment on who you think is the biggest bust that you remember, and let us know if you think we missed any major busts that we didn't put on this list.